Hello, Archie Dunlop here with Talking Astrology with Archie on the weekend of September the 23rd and 24th. So there's a slight change of format here. Since the beginning of February, I have done a video every single day. It was a bit depressing at the beginning because no one was watching. You know, I would put up a video and actually no one would watch. But I mean, I suppose there are certain advantages of no one watching your videos because, you know, you can do what you like. There's a certain freedom when no one is watching. Anyway, a few more people are now watching and I've gone over 1,000 subscribers. Thanks again for all your support. And so I think now is a time where I'm going to do 6 videos a week rather than 1 video a week, or rather 6 sort of daily horoscope style videos a week. So I would have 5 videos Monday to Friday, and then I'm going to have a weekend video. And this is the first of the weekend videos where I'm going to do Saturday and Sunday in one video. This was the format I used when I was contracted to do horoscopes for a cell phone company in the UK. I would do it 6 times a week. So I'm kind of going back to a format that I'm familiar with. Okay, so by the way, this does create some slack in the system, which I think is good. It means that, you know, I'm less likely to sort of blow up if something happens. Okay, so as far as what I want to talk about today, I want to talk about Ukraine. I mean, why not? It's one of my favorite subjects. I want to give an update. I want to look at Ukraine's horoscope. I want to look at the horoscope of Zelensky. I also want to look at the horoscope of this supposed Ukrainian counteroffensive, which I believe started on June the 4th of this year. You know, when you start something like an offensive, you want to make sure it happens when the stars are properly aligned. So I am going to be looking at that. You know, I'm going to try to be neutral. Not gonna take sides, I hope. So that's my approach. I'm going to give my views about you know, where things are going from an astrological point of view. One has to be careful. You know, everyone's got a view on where the where Ukraine is going. It's pretty much impossible to find a neutral opinion. Certainly in the West, and of course Russia has its own biases. So yes, it's difficult. But I think the astrology is kind of telling us something. So I will be looking at that. But first, I want to look at the astrology for this weekend, which is the weekend covering Saturday the 23rd of September and Sunday the 24th. So let's look at the chart. That is Joe Biden's chart. I don't really think we need to look at Joe Biden's chart, do we? So the weekend chart. Okay, this is the weekend chart. So I've set it for New York. But I've set it not for noon on a particular day, but I've set it for midnight Saturday, Sunday. So midnight on Sunday. So that's kind of halfway through the weekend. So, you know, the main thing going on this weekend is that the moon is going through Capricorn throughout the weekend. Unless you're in the Americas, in which case on Sunday evening, you will experience the moon going into Aquarius. But by and large, it's a moon in Capricorn weekend. Weekends are supposed to be a time when people can relax and focus on things like family and friends. But, with the moon in Capricorn, people are thinking about money. We're thinking about money. We're thinking about security. Okay, the moon doesn't work very well in Capricorn. The moon is in its own sign in Cancer, therefore it's in its detriment in Capricorn. So yeah, there might be a certain meanness there. We might not be as generous as we are usually, but I'm not sure if we should necessarily apologize for that. I mean, we do have to look after ourselves. And as they say, don't they, charity begins at home. I mean, that's a very moon in Capricorn sentiment, that charity begins at home. So that's one aspect of what's going on. But we can see it in a different light. This weekend there is a Grand Trine in Earth signs. So a Grand Trine in Earth signs means that you've got a kind of equilateral triangle going on in the chart. So here's the moon at 18 Capricorn, and you can see that it's trine Mercury, sort of roughly 120 degrees from Mercury. Mercury is trine Jupiter, and Jupiter is trine the moon. So we have a Grand Trine in Earth signs, and we've almost got Uranus involved in that Grand Trine. So there's a lot of Earth energy there. It's a time when we really can sort out our own material security. But the Earth signs are not just about money. They're not just about things we own. There is a spirituality to the Earth which we sometimes forget. We stand on the Earth. There is a view that there is an Earth spirit. Spirits connected with nature, and we're all part of this. People think about Gaia and Earth goddesses and things like that, and for some of us, we can tune into this kind of spirituality. It may be a good weekend for being out there, being with nature, just sort of, I don't know, going into some quiet spot with trees and sort of sitting down, meditating, feeling what the trees are telling you, feeling what nature is telling you, feeling what the whole creative process is telling you. So yeah, try to see things that way. And I know that Moon in Capricorn has a reputation for being a bit mean, but try to elevate the Moon in Capricorn. Okay, we do have to look after our own security, but our own security also rests on the planet, on environmental soundness. If our environment is collapsing, for whatever reason, being overexploited, then we lose our security, and we just really shouldn't forget that. So yeah, that's ways in which perhaps this Grand Trine in Earth signs might be manifesting. And if we look at this Grand Trine, we notice that Mercury and Jupiter are in trine, and the moon brings them together. Mercury trine Jupiter. This is a very good time for communicating. Mercury is the planet of communication. Jupiter is sort of a planet of good fortune. We put them in trine, and we can talk. We can get our message across. And we know how to craft the message so that we don't upset people. We can sort of focus on down-to-earth realities, sorting out the facts. Remember, Mercury is in Virgo. Mercury in Virgo is very organized, likes to get the facts right. There's a good sense of detail there. And so that really helps. So, Mercury and Jupiter is about the message. The moon is also about the message. The moon is about function in a chart. It's about movement. Things don't really move without the moon. The moon creates the flow. So the moon allows us to get the message out. And of course, I should also point out that this weekend it's the autumnal equinox. The beginning of autumn if you're in the northern hemisphere, I suppose the beginning of spring if you're in the southern hemisphere. I've already put out a video about the equinox, the autumnal equinox. If you haven't seen it, then perhaps you should. Well, I would say that, wouldn't I? So it's just an important time. We need to sort of have moments of silence and to consider this change, this seasonal change, and getting back to what I was saying about the spiritual side of Earth. We need to understand the seasons, get into the seasons, relate to the seasons. I know it's easy to forget all this with computers and bright lights, and cell phones, and we can sort of just be in our own bubble and couldn't care less what's going on outside. Can't even notice the change of the seasons. Well, we need to focus on that. That's very important for our own sanity. Another thing going on is that there are two sesquiquadrates. Those sesquiquadrates are 135 degree aspects. There's a sesquiquadrate between the Sun here and Jupiter. That's sort of at the beginning of the weekend. Again, I talked about this in my equinox video. When Sun is sesquiquadrate Jupiter, there's a certain tendency to go over the top, to exaggerate, and so we have to be aware of that. If you see something and you want to respond to it, make sure your response is proportionate. Don't go over the top just for the sake of it. And then at the end of the week, not really at the end of the weekend, but a bit later on, we start to feel the influence of a Mercury sesquiquadrate Pluto. So here is Mercury at 13 Virgo. There's Pluto at 27 Capricorn. So Mercury, planet of communication. Pluto, the planet of transformation, the planet of power. And as I think I said before, quite recently, this aspect can work in two different ways, two rather contradictory ways. Pluto can really make us a bit afraid, can make us not want to reveal things. So one way Mercury-Pluto sesquiquadrate the way it might manifest is we just don't want to talk about things. There are just things that we want to keep secret. We're just afraid about revealing them, and we just want to keep it all to ourselves. And so that might silence us. But there's another way in which Mercury-Pluto sesquiquadrate could work, and it's about being manipulative. Mercury is a communication planet. Pluto is into power. So we want to communicate in such a way that we boost our own power. This is why Mercury-Pluto contacts are often connected with propaganda. It's states trying to mess with our minds, trying to get us to think something which might not actually be true. So if you're into manipulating people's minds, it could be a good weekend. Though you've got to deal with the consequences of it. There's no is that the right thing to do? Really, do you really want to manipulate people's minds? Are you really prepared to accept the consequences of that? On the other hand, there are going to be people, things, organizations trying to manipulate our minds. I mean, isn't that called gaslighting? I'm still trying to work out what gaslighting means, but it's about getting someone to think something that they don't really want to think. Trying to persuade someone that their thoughts are wrong. And I think with Mercury sesquiquadrate Pluto, there's going to be a lot of gaslighting this weekend. Whatever that means. I've looked up gaslighting, that word. I've spent a long time trying to work out what it means, and I think I got it. But right now, I don't feel that I can adequately articulate it. But I do know that Mercury sesquiquadrate Pluto could be about gaslighting. Anyway, that's the positions. Those are the positions of the planets this weekend. And so what I want to do now is go through the 12 signs and look at what's going on for the 12 signs this weekend. So these are my forecasts for the 12 signs for the weekend of September the 23rd and September the 24th. Aries. This weekend, you're focused on being successful, and you don't want to waste time with pointless socializing. And by concentrating on your goals for the future, you can bring to bear your personality and your talents. You know how to communicate, and at some stage you can make some important connections. But you do have to be nice. Taurus. It's time to let go of some of your preconceptions. The material world is not just about money, it's about the earth on which you are standing. And being an earthy Taurian, you can get in touch with the spirit of life, which is part of everything. As the weekend closes, you realize that your career priorities are changing. Gemini. You face an intellectual challenge. You're minding your own business, thinking your own thoughts, when you realize that something doesn't make sense. Perhaps it's a feeling, or a dream, or a reaction to a person or event. You have to engage your emotions, as well as your brain, and allow yourself to move in new directions. And with emotional flow comes the possibility of romantic success. Cancer. Relationships are going to be important all weekend. There are people you need to interact with, and if you're on your own, you might feel that something is missing. And with the moon making brilliant aspects to both Mercury and Jupiter, the right relationship can help you to express yourself in new ways. Leo. It's an important time for Leos. The Sun, your ruler, is moving into Libra, where it makes a hard aspect to Jupiter. You're ready to embrace the outside world and even to develop a public stance. But in the process, you might take something too far. A worthy ambition that somehow manages to exceed itself. Virgo. Over the weekend, you're feeling good about yourself, and it feels that a lot of things are coming together, and you can be creative without having to think about it. Indeed, when you're lost in the creative process, the magic happens. But be careful how you use your power. If you use it in the wrong way, there could be trouble. Libra, the sun is now in your star sign, and the Libra birthday season has started. But this weekend, you need to tone things down. In spite of the temptations, you don't have to be everywhere, and if you can settle in one place, so much the better. And when you see people being emotional in an exaggerated way, you probably need to walk the other way. Scorpio. There are some work issues that you can't stop thinking about, and you're not the kind of person to forget about them just because it is the weekend, in which case you might as well do something about it. If you can go into work, that would be great, or perhaps you just want to plan your next move. But don't keep silent, because the power of your words right now is quite exceptional. Sagittarius. Make sure that you've got enough space. Some people have big egos and they might be trying to crowd you out. Yet other people are very obliging and they'll do what they can to make sure that you have a great weekend. For your part, the purchasing or creation of small gifts can help smooth things along. Capricorn. Things are looking good for Capricorns. The moon, while moving through your star sign, makes trine aspects to Mercury and Jupiter. One thing moves to another with enormous ease. And if you want to say something or put something into action, then you have your chance. And it does pay to be optimistic. Aquarius. Somebody has got ideas that just aren't realistic, or they're trying to do too much. So it might be your job to bring them down to earth. But don't make too much of a fuss about it, because this weekend the general aim is to avoid attention. Though if you are in the Americas, there may be an unexpected blast of activity on Sunday evening. Pisces. At the beginning of a weekend, there seems to be something holding you back. Perhaps someone making annoying criticisms, or you're being forced to get things absurdly right. But as the weekend progresses, things become more exciting and your social life could be very rewarding. Parties and other gatherings could bring romantic opportunity. So I'm now going to switch to the I Ching. As always, I asked the question. The question for this weekend is, of course, what is this weekend going to be like for visitors to my YouTube channel? So the first hexagram I got was hexagram 55, which is abundance. In itself, abundance is about the peak. The Wilhelm translation of the I Ching talks about, high culture, high culture at its absolute peak. And, it says, be not sad, be as the midday sun. The sun, after it hits peak, enjoy the sun while it's at its peak at midday. But after midday, the sun inevitably goes down towards the western horizon. That's just the way it is. And so there may be a feeling of, this is it, good as it gets. And don't be sad about it. Just enjoy it. But it's more complicated than that. Because we have two moving lines. The second moving line moves, and it's not great. This moving line is about people not really taking us seriously. I mean, it's their problem, not ours. We we try our hardest, but there's a lot of mistrust, jealousy, even ridicule. We try to do the right thing and we get ridiculed for it. And it's a passing situation, but we just have to accept it. So yes, we're trying to enjoy culture at its very highest, but we're not being treated properly, and that might spoil things, particularly at the beginning of a weekend. I think this more refers to Saturday than to Sunday. And there's another moving line, and this is about our behavior, probably late on Saturday, maybe early on Sunday. We're going to be, some of us are going to be a bit obnoxious. We're going to find ourselves taking the view, this is the way it is. Everything is sorted out, but I'm in control. I'm in control of this whole thing. And I'm not going to let other people have a say. But you can't have a situation like that. If you want to enjoy everything being offered, you can't try to control everything, because as soon as you try to control things, you just lose it, and you don't get what you want. So if you want the benefits of the hexagram, which abundance moves to, you've got to behave appropriately. That first moving line, people not taking you seriously, don't worry about it. Don't overreact. Sometimes, when people don't take us seriously, when we're ridiculed, we can overreact by being incredibly arrogant, claiming we know it all, refusing to accept any criticism, and then we just attract even more criticism. So what we have to do is be resolute but humble. This is not a time for just showing off. It's not a time for being arrogant. It's just making the most of the situation and not taking criticism and ridicule to heart. So if we can adopt the right attitude, then, as I said, we can get the benefits of the second hexagram. And the second hexagram is this, we've had quite recently. It's hexagram number 14, which is possession in great measure. And this probably refers more to Sunday than to Saturday. So I would have said possession in great measure. Might literally be possession in great measure, like money. But, on Sunday, are there so many opportunities for making money? But maybe it's more about our own possessions. What do we own? And what we own is not just what we have in the bank. It's not just our stuff. It's our intellect. It's our experience. It's our knowledge. And I think we're going to be in a situation where these possessions on Sunday are going to be particularly prized. We have it. People will want to know what we've got to say. People will want to benefit from these possessions we have. These are not the worldly possessions. These are the possessions that come with us. Some of these may be the possessions we take with us. I suppose if you're into karma, reincarnation, that kind of thing, these are the things we have developed, learnt, that no one can take away from us. But we don't lose even when we're dead. So on Sunday we can really tune into these possessions, and there may be the opportunity to make more or to get more possessions, but I don't think we should think like that. We should think about what we've got and how we can make good use of it to benefit both ourselves and other people. So I want to now go back to the astrology. Today I want to talk about Ukraine. Top right, there's a picture of Zelensky Hasn't he been in America recently, or is he still there? Didn't he go to the UN and talk to senators and so forth? So let's start with Ukraine. I've looked at this chart several times before, so there's no harm in looking at it again. I mean, I should say, the thing about the Ukraine chart, I think it's a chart that works, and I think it's like the United States chart, but the United States and the Ukraine charts are two charts which I really do feel work. And I think that perhaps the reason why these two countries work is because they have incredibly defined beginnings. The US has got that Declaration of Independence at a particular time. Ukraine similarly has got a Declaration of Independence late on August the 24th, 1991 in Kiev. Some sources say 6, some sources say 5:31 in the afternoon. I believe Nick Campion's Book of World Horoscope says 5:31, although I've seen other sources say that it's 6. But anyway, I've gone for 5:31. But because we have that precise moment, somehow it all fits together. Places like Britain. You've got all sorts of dates you might want to take, or France. The French Revolution, the Fifth Republic, Fourth Republic, whatever. But with Ukraine and the United States, these charts really do seem to work. So I just want to briefly talk about some aspects of the Ukrainian chart which I haven't talked about before. The Ukrainian chart does have a strong 8th house. If you use the Placidus house system, it's got Sun and Mars in Virgo. Sun and Mars in the 8th house in Virgo. If you use the whole sign house system, then you've still got a big 8th house, but you've got Mercury, Venus, Jupiter in the 8th. And I think this 8th house is really unfortunate. The 8th house traditionally associated with death. And, there is no doubt that a lot of Ukrainians have died since this war started. A lot, like literally hundreds of thousands. And, that is, that is just, that's just terrible, isn't it? I know how did it get to that? How did Ukraine allow itself to get into that situation? Okay, you might say, well, Russia invaded it, but still, this constant sort of mobilization and pushing more and more troops into the front. This offensive. Pushing soldiers constantly forward. Really massive casualties, and this recent offensive that started in June the 4th has been particularly catastrophic. Ukraine having to build bigger cemeteries, and I kind of think that this 8th house is really starting to show itself, and that is certainly obviously is not good. Another thing about the Ukraine chart that I find quite interesting is the Sun-Moon midpoint. So the Sun-Moon midpoint has Mercury on it. So let me just show you what I mean. So here are the midpoints for Ukraine, and it says Mercury is square the Sun-Moon midpoint. Also, you have Jupiter square the Sun-Moon midpoint. So you've got Mercury and Jupiter square the Sun-Moon midpoint. So going back to the chart. So if you take the sun and the moon, their sun moon midpoint is going to be about here. It's going to be at around 26 Scorpio, because you can see the sun and the moon is here. And if you work it through, sun moon midpoint is here. And so Mercury, this Mercury-Jupiter conjunction is square the sun moon midpoint. And when you've got a planet on the sun moon midpoint, it really defines you. The classic example that Charles Harvey uses in his book he wrote with Michael Harding, Working Astrology. He uses the example of Janis Joplin, the sort of 60s over-the-top singer, who has, whose chart, I think she's a Capricorn, she was a Capricorn, and a lot of people, some people suggested it couldn't make sense of her chart, but, as Charles Harvey pointed out, she has Jupiter on the sun-moon midpoint, and that makes her a really sort of over-the-top person. So, whatever planets you've got on the sun-moon midpoint, and when I say got on, that has the conjunction to the sun-moon midpoint, opposition to the sun-moon midpoint, square to the sun-moon midpoint, semi-square to the sun-moon midpoint, or a sesquiquadrate to the sun-moon midpoint. We're not talking about trines, sextiles, quincunxes. No, it's those hard aspects: conjunction, opposition, square, semi-square, sesquiquadrate. So that Mercury-Jupiter conjunction is highly, highly configured in Ukraine's chart. It is a Mercury-Jupiter country in some respects, and that Mercury-Jupiter country is in Leo. Now, in terms of the war, I think we're really seeing this because, one thing that the Ukrainians are really good at is messaging. They're able to give an impression. They're able to, if necessary, distort the facts. Now, I understand Russia distorts the facts. Russia lies, all that kind of stuff. Everyone lies. That's what countries do, particularly when they're at war. But I think the Ukrainians are better at it. They are able to spin this narrative all the time about the way the war is going. Even when, you get a negative thing, for example, beginning of December, there was a lot of people were, I think 17 people were killed in the eastern Ukrainian town of, Kostyantinivka. And this missile landed, 17 people were killed. It was the Russians' fault. And then, the Ukrainians said it sounded convincing. Russians killed 17 people being reckless. The Ukrainians did their best to spin it. And then now, even people in the West are recognizing it. It was almost certainly a Ukrainian missile, that maybe an air defense missile that caused the damage. So, yeah, and so the Ukrainians are really into the message. Being able to exploit things, when they do something, when they hit, I don't know, what is it, a Kerch bridge, or destroy the Moskva, they talk about it, they talk about it, let everyone know what's happened, and it gets people excited. I think this is perhaps part of the reason why Ukraine has been so good at getting money out of the West, and particularly America, is they're able to spin a narrative. They're able to tell America how things are going, and Mercury doesn't always tell the truth. That's the thing. So this whole communication thing is something that an exaggeration and so forth is just very much part of the way Ukraine is, I think. So those are a few things. One other thing is that Venus. I've already mentioned this, but Ukraine has Venus square the Mars Saturn midpoint, and I always trying to think about what does that actually mean when you've got a country that's got Venus square the Mars Saturn midpoint. One disturbing way of looking at Venus on the Mars Saturn midpoint is to say, well, the Mars Saturn midpoint is about potentially death, destruction, and so forth. You heard the story about, I don't know whether it's true, that Ukraine is actually considering mobilizing women. I know Israel does that, and I suppose the Soviet Union during the Second World War had a lot of women fighting. But I would recommend that the Ukraine probably doesn't mobilize women, because if it does, Venus on the Mars Saturn midpoint, a lot of women being killed potentially, in a way that might be very newsworthy, might be really quite exceptional, with Venus aspecting the Mars Saturn midpoint. Now, as far as what's going on with this chart, the sun is that sun in Virgo, sun at 056 Virgo. We really have to look at that sun. I've mentioned this before. For example, there are other organizations which have their sun at the beginning of Virgo. Particularly, this is the chart for the ratification of NATO. So NATO has sun at 1 degree 7 Virgo. Biden, if you look at Joe Biden's chart, Joe Biden has got his North Node at 0 degrees Virgo. So this 0 Virgo has come up several times, and it's something we need to think about a lot, because what's happening at the moment is that Saturn is 2 or 3. It currently is at 2 or 3 degrees Pisces, so Saturn is going retrograde, and on November the 4th of this year, Saturn goes stationary direct at 0 degrees 31 Pisces. So Saturn goes stationary direct, right opposition Ukraine's sun. I think that is potentially highly problematic. Remember, Saturn is also going to be goes stationary direct opposition NATO's sun. It's also going to be going stationary direct opposition Biden's North Node. In other words, conjunct his South Node. And I'm thinking maybe November, at least astrologically, could be the time when the whole thing just potentially starts coming to an end. In terms of a war, I think it's going to be really difficult as we move into November. The sun in a horoscope can also represent the leader, and of course the leader is Zelensky. So we have Saturn hitting the sun. That could be difficult. And there is another aspect going on. October the 16th, Uranus makes a square to Ukraine's moon, and the moon in a chart, okay, it's just in general, it's an important point in the chart, but it can represent the people. Uranus square the moon. It may become difficult to control people. There may be real rumblings of discontent. So that's certainly something that needs to be considered. I should quickly look at Ukraine's solar return. Yes, people have solar returns, but countries can have solar returns as well. So solar return for the Ukraine. So this would have been the solar return, which was exact, yeah, so on August the 24th, 2023. So what we see about this solar return, which should sort of describe perhaps for next year, there's the sun at 0 degrees 56 Virgo. Look, it's opposition Saturn. The moon is at 0 degrees Sagittarius. It's square Saturn. So if you look at it, sun is sort of 3 degrees before Saturn, so 3 degrees short of Saturn. So if you symbolically, and you count August the 24th, 3 months, August, so that would be September, October, November, that would take us to the end of November. So there's further suggestion there that November might be difficult. Then the moon is also making a square to Saturn, so that's 4 degrees apart, which would take us to December. So further evidence that November, December looks really difficult. Now, as far as Zelensky's chart is concerned, it's quite amazing that we apparently have a time chart for Zelensky. So let's... So here is Zelensky's chart. I mean, I've looked at this chart several times, quite a lot before. I mean, one point I always make about Zelensky's chart is he's got a lot of planets in fixed signs. Remember, the fixed signs are Taurus, Leo, Scorpio, Aquarius. There's his Leo planets, Aquarius planets. Okay, Uranus is a generational planet, but with these fixed planets, when you've got all those fixed signs, and he doesn't really have any planets in mutable signs except for Jupiter, or he's got Jupiter in Gemini. He's very stubborn. He keeps going in the same direction, same way. And being the head of state of the Ukraine, he kind of symbolizes the country. It will not change. It will not stop. It will not negotiate. It will carry on until it supposedly gets its victory. And that stubbornness can be a great advantage, but when things are going against you, it can be a real problem. Zelensky has the moon is conjunct his IC. There's his moon at 1743 Leo, and there's his IC at 2021 Leo, and Uranus is going to first I should say I think around December the 1st, Uranus is square his IC. Uranus is like here, and it squares his IC. And then on November the 13th, there's a new moon, which is square his IC. So in November, really, this part of his chart gets really chewed up by Uranus. And I think that that's important. Look, I know normally I don't look at lunar returns, but I just want to quickly go through some lunar returns. The lunar return, they only last a month. So I want to look at a couple of Zelensky's lunar returns. This is when the moon returns to where it was, where someone was born. So, here, for example, is lunar return for September the 12th, 2023. So this is where he's in this lunar return at the moment. What's interesting is you've got Neptune quite close to the descendant, and that kind of echoes Zelensky's chart as well, because Zelensky, if you look at Zelensky's chart, he's got Neptune sort of 4 degrees short of the descendant. So this lunar return, he's also got Neptune 4 degrees short of the descendant. So this kind of echoes something in him that he's got already. Now, is it about him being deceived? Is it about him deceiving, or is it about him? I don't know. His friends and enemies. It's all becoming a bit confusing for him. Some people have said that his trip to the United States wasn't really very successful. He wasn't treated quite in the way he used to be treated. He's perhaps losing his shine. But there's a point of confusion here in this lunar return, and maybe the things he says are not having the impact, and he's getting confused by other people, the people he has to deal with, the countries he has to deal with. That might not be helping. Just going to quickly look at some other. This is a sort of update. There is his October. His October lunar return. October the 9th, 2023. So this should cover him October the 9th through to early November. What I find interesting is Venus. Look at Venus. Venus is conjunct Ukraine's sun, and you can see that Venus is making an opposition to Saturn. So this lunar return maybe says something about his experience, but it's also a reminder about what's going on in the sky early mid-October. You have Venus opposition Saturn hitting Ukraine's sun. So that Saturn hitting Ukraine's sun is now starting to be triggered by Venus. So by October, that Venus opposition Saturn hitting Ukraine's sun, hitting NATO's sun, hitting Biden's North Node. So there are problems there. I want to look at Zelensky's solar arc directions. So remember, this is how you move his planets 1 degree every year. So I wanted to look at his solar arc directions. Well, I've taken it for now, September the 22nd, 2023. See if there's any interesting solar arc directions going on. So Zelensky's chart is in the middle, and his solar arc directions are on the outside. His solar arc directed Saturn is at 1452 Libra. His Mercury is at 1456 Capricorn. So he's got solar arc directed Saturn hitting his Mercury right now. And Mercury is about himself. It's about how he's thinking. And with Saturn squaring his Mercury, I don't think he's in a great state of mind. I think he's starting to see reality here. I think he's probably feeling a little depressed, a bit negative. And I think that Saturn is a bit of a problem. And I think that this may have particularly hurt him when he's in the US. His trip to the US, I suspect, was really upsetting for him. That's my guess. Now, let me tell you why. He has got his Mercury at 1456 Capricorn. And so in terms of the United States chart, this is the United States chart, 4th of July, 1776. So his Mercury is opposition the United States' sun, United States sun at 1319 Cancer. So I know he's great pals with many Americans, but somehow America is not entirely good for him. And with solar arc directed Saturn hitting his Mercury, he's perhaps now seeing it for what it is. And look at the USA. The USA has got its Saturn at 1448 Libra. So, in other words, the USA's Sun-Saturn square is hitting his Mercury, and so we think that Zelensky's getting all this support from the US, but I think privately his feelings about America may not be great, and I don't think his trip to the US is going so well. And I suppose maybe part of a problem with the United States is that I criticize the United States all the time, but one thing I will give the United States is the First Amendment. I do think the First Amendment is the best thing about the US. There is free speech. You can say what you like. In Europe, people have been sort of, when people are sort of negative about Ukraine, when they've sort of reported about what's going on in Donbass, they face prosecution. Their free speech, or as the Americans would put it, their First Amendment rights, not there is a First Amendment rights, that get infringed. Ukraine, you don't really have much free speech, but the United States, you have free speech, and perhaps that's the problem. You've got people, in the United States, there are many views about Ukraine, and people can actually express themselves in the US about it. And maybe Zelensky doesn't like that. That's just a theory. I don't know what you think about that. But yeah, I think there's something about America that is not entirely great in terms of Zelensky. His USA's chart it's not all good. So I want to finish by looking at offensives. Now, if you're going to invade a country, or if you're going to take a military initiative, you really need to take that military initiative when the stars are properly aligned. I mean, logically, isn't that right? So let's look at an example of a military initiative historically. Let's take some random military initiative. Let's take the Battle of the Bulge, for example. So the Battle of the Bulge was on December the 16th, 1944, when the Germans, attacked the American force. The America had gone piling in. They'd taken Belgium. They'd taken most of France. Obviously, the British had done this, as British, Americans, Canadians, French themselves, and so on. And the Battle of the Bulge was his last desperate counterattack. I think the aim was to get to Antwerp on the sea, to sort of send panzers through to get to Antwerp, to divide the British and the Americans and so forth. And so, it was Hitler's last offensive. So here is the chart for the start of the Battle of the Bulge. And I think this shows quite conclusively that Hitler didn't consult astrologers. I mean, he didn't consult astrologers, by the way. He was just too into himself to consult astrologers, I think. So this is the start for the. It says 5:30 a.m. I've set it for Strasbourg. It wasn't Strasbourg. I should probably have set it for Bastogne or whatever. But this is the approximate time on December the 16th, when the Battle of the Bulge started, when the Germans attacked the Americans. And you can see that it's a really bad chart. I mean, look at the moon. This is the moon in Capricorn. You've just had a new moon. Okay. Offensives often happen on new moons because it's dark, because you can't see the moon. I mean, that makes sense. But the moon is applying to an opposition of Saturn. And look at Mercury. Mercury is at 822 Capricorn, and Saturn is at 822 Cancer. So starting an offensive the Battle of the Bulge. Maybe it had to be, there were other necessities. With Mercury exactly opposition Saturn and Moon moving to an opposition of Saturn, you can see why the Battle of the Bulge, the German offensive, was doomed with that chart. So, what about Ukraine's great counteroffensive? Started June 4th of this year, 2023. So here's a chart for the counteroffensive. I don't know what time it started. I don't even know where precisely. I set it for around 6 a.m. Don't focus too much on the ascendant. I said it's for 6 a.m. in Donetsk. I don't know where precisely. What I really want to look at is the fact that it started on a full moon. Starting an offensive on a full moon, it's applying to an opposition of the sun. That is not good. And you've got Saturn involved. The moon is separating from a square of Saturn. Moon is going to an opposition of the sun. This is astrologically, this is a terrible time to start a counteroffensive. And if we actually look at the full moon chart, here's the full moon chart. Let's here's the full moon that was on June the 4th. Just as the offensive was starting, there was a full moon, and so I set this chart for Kiev, so exact full moon. And you can see at that full moon, Saturn was on the midheaven, and so this counteroffensive was very inauspicious, and it all certainly suggests that the Ukrainians, whoever was planning it, was not consulting an astrologer. I mean, that seems pretty clear to me. So this counteroffensive that we're involved in, that Ukraine is conducting, of course, it's not working well, and it's pretty much failed. The Ukrainians are kind of spinning it in other ways, but they would, because Ukraine has got Mercury and Jupiter aspecting the Sun Moon midpoint. They say all sorts of stuff, but we just shouldn't necessarily believe what the Ukrainians say, because it's not necessarily a reliable source. Anyway, that's my update on Ukraine and Zelensky. I hope you found it of some use, and I will talk to you again on Monday.